Well, g'day and welcome to another episode of the Carnage House Productions Young Aussie Entrepreneurs Series. Today we've got with me a very special guest, potentially a distant relative as well, but more importantly, a founder of a startup called STAKK. His name is Connor Cameron. Connor, how are you going?
I'm good, and yourself?
Going well. Great guns. Great guns. Now, Connor, could you tell us a little bit about STAKK, basically just what it does?
Yeah, sure. So STAKK is a platform where people can come on and book high school students for help around the house, pretty much things related to gardening, cleaning, just getting an extra helping hand.
Yeah. Yeah. So did you find particularly that this was a niche or an opportunity that you found personally was kind of left unfilled until you started STAKK?
Yeah, so I guess before I started it, actually, I was my mates and I were always chatting about how difficult it was to find decent paying jobs
Yeah.
as 15, 16-year-olds. And we knew we were willing to work hard and help people out. And we knew that there were people out there who could use the help, but there wasn't really a platform available to us to do that. So I figured I'd do it myself.
100%. Well, that's the entrepreneurial spirit, and one of the things I like about this program in particular is there's a lot of people out there who talk about things and talk about doing things, but the people I try to interview are the guys who have actually done it. So you started this when you were 16. So I know when I was 16, I was basically kind of lazy and incompetent, and I would be lounging around the house. But you've actually developed an actual startup. How many students have you helped, or has STAKK used through the platform?
I don't know an exact number, but probably around 80 have worked for STAKK so far.
Yeah.
At different stages. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. And how has the feedback been from the students who have kind of gotten jobs where they otherwise wouldn't have?
Oh, it's awesome. They're just stoked that they have something that fits in with their schedules. They can work when they have the time, as opposed to other part-time casual jobs with lower pay and set working times.
Yeah, of course. And I guess there are a bunch of those jobs that people need doing, which otherwise would be going to people who are, I guess, licensed trades or people who are demanding a much higher salary. Would that be fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a gardener here in Sydney would probably cost anywhere between 35 and 80 bucks an hour.
Yeah.
And STAKK's 25. So we mainly focus on unskilled labor. So just really a helping hand. Things like mowing the lawn and that are great.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think people appreciate that we're giving students that otherwise wouldn't have access to these jobs a chance.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, mowing the lawn's an interesting one. Definitely, I reckon I could still muck that up. How has the feedback been from the people who need the jobs done?
Yeah, it's that was probably the biggest surprise when I first started getting the feedback. I figured that all of these students, surely one of them was bound to mess up at some stage, but no, it's been resoundingly positive. Yeah, it's been really good.
Well, that's fantastic. That's good to hear. I'm surprised that there wouldn't have been that many kind of horror stories. I guess there may be an occasional bad review, but I guess that's more of a reflection on teenagers in general than it is your platform. How did you find the process of setting up STAKK? Was it difficult to obtain finance or build the website or build the platform, or how did you find setting it up?
Yeah, so that was a bit of a roller coaster that got me to where I am today. So I started it off all self-funded, 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
Had a freelance developer build me a website that was pretty much just a knockoff Airtasker.
Right.
And our only value add was that you could now hire students, which Airtasker didn't let you. and the website was shoddy, hard to use. Within the first month, we had like 1,000 signups.
Yeah.
Very few jobs actually getting completed just because of how difficult it was to use the platform.
Right.
We had no payment system available. So really it was a rough job.
Yeah.
And continued with that for about 9 months, and there was a lot of money put into development work, design, until I just figured how am I going to be able to compete in terms of website usability versus someone like Airtasker who has millions and millions of dollars in their marketing budget to do these sorts of things.
Yeah.
So I went back to the simplest possible idea, which was all we needed was a booking form, a way to take payments, and then we'd do the rest. And within that first month of putting out that new site, really simple, go on 30 seconds to make a booking.
Yeah.
We find a student, sort out payment and everything. Within that first month, we did $5,500 in jobs after launch. And that was when it hit me that what was supposedly the simplest version was actually the most viable.
Sure. Well, that's really interesting. And how did you market the new website?
Oh, it was a lot of different stuff. A lot of it's through social media. We have a big Instagram following, and we'd go through and post through different Facebook groups, local community groups, putting out flyers, did some small Facebook ads here and there, a little bit of PR publicity. So, and all of that sort of came together and worked out well.
Yeah. So what did you find was the most effective way to reach your audience? Because I guess as much as you are trying to reach the potential employees, so the high school students, you're also trying to reach the people who have houses, kind of the older generation as well, boomers, so to speak. What did you find was the most effective for reaching kind of both of those age groups?
So I mentioned that we were posting in a lot of community groups, and I found that worked very well. I mean, the people that are joining those Facebook community groups are typically drawn into this culture of helping people out anyways.
Yeah.
So when they saw a 16-year-old kid come in with an idea that could help them out, a lot of them jumped on just to try it.
Yeah.
And a lot of them have stuck with it and keep making bookings. What are we, a year and 3 months after that first launch?
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And it's something that Carnage House is trying to do. We have kind of it's a little bit dichotomous. We've got a bunch of people who are kind of that older generation who are into politics and current affairs and things like that, and then we've also got a bunch of the younger groups who are following because we post memes and vlogs and stuff like that. But we've also found that the Facebook groups are definitely more actively patrolled by the older community compared to Instagram, particularly, which is basically kind of like the millennials and people younger than that. So I think that's definitely that kind of rings true what you were saying. What has been your biggest challenge, do you think, so far with STAKK?
I guess having started it in high school, it was sort of a blessing and a curse. It meant I had not only access to the students, but I had this frame of mind, so I understood where they were coming from, which meant that I could set it up in their best interest, because it would have been my best interest. But then on the curse side, school is 8 to 4 a day, plus more for sport. You're leaving very little time after homework and study to actually work on this sort of stuff. And then going through year 12 with HSC, I really struggled to put much time into it myself. Luckily, I had a couple of other people that I'd employed earlier that were able to keep it going in my absence.
Yeah.
And yeah, they've been super helpful.
So how many people are working at STAKK at the moment?
So there's just myself and two other students that are on the management side.
Yeah.
And then as far as students attending the jobs, we have around 30 active.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. And so how often would they be completing jobs roughly? Do you have any idea?
It depends. I'm actually finding right now with the coronavirus that a lot of the students are getting a little bit unmotivated. You think
Sure.
with all of this time, that they'd want to do as many jobs as possible. But yeah, I found them to be a bit unmotivated. So what we've had is a group of less than 10 people who are attending all of the jobs that they can. So they're really focusing on that.
Sure.
But otherwise, yeah, those students, it really depends. We've got a couple of kids who make over $500 a month,
Yeah.
just doing these jobs. So that's over 25 hours of work, and then other ones who will only do a job every couple of months.
Right. And so I assume that you kind of STAKK works in a similar way to Airtasker in that you take a clip of every out of every fee.
Yeah. So the student gets 80%.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's much better than I think Uber drivers and menu log drivers and all of those type of things. I think that's pretty fair, pretty reasonable. You mentioned coronavirus. Obviously, there's a lot of limiting in terms of face-to-face contact. Have you found that that's kind of had a pretty substantial effect on STAKK?
No, not necessarily. Actually, we spent some time developing extensive guidelines on what to do on both sides. So, in terms of when you're not allowed to make a booking. So if you have recently returned to the country, we've said that please refrain from making bookings and things like that. And then ranges from that to when you're in the job, simple things like sanitizing your hands, wearing gloves, avoiding touching surfaces, that sort of thing. So during the bookings, that hasn't really been an issue.
Okay.
One issue that we are finding though is that while our existing customers are actually booking more, it's more difficult to bring in new customers just on a sort of trust thing. These existing customers have been with us for a while. They know what we do and they know that we're not going to put them in the way of any harm. Whereas with the new bookings, it's a little bit more difficult.
Sure. I guess that's understandable. People who are familiar with your platform probably understand that you're a pretty sensible business and that you're kind of looking after their best interests. But I can also understand why, particularly if it is older people who have homes and are probably a little bit more cautious about who's coming near them or who's helping them out with things. That makes sense, I guess. What is next for STAKK? What is kind of the development pipeline for you over the next, I guess, 12 to 24 months?
It's difficult to say at the moment. Sort of just taking every week, month as it comes. The main focus right now isn't so much on product. It's more on just getting new bookings in. We've got a decent platform and a solid business model. Not to say that'll be the end game business model, but it's working for us right now. So what we're going to try and do for now is just continue with this and mostly try and build up recurring bookings. So our monthly recurring revenue is the main focus right now. And then moving forward, once we've built up that revenue substantially, then we can start to look at automation and things in linking students to bookings.
Right. Right. So that would be the next step. And would you be looking to raise capital for that type of thing?
It's again difficult to say right now because I'm not in a position where I need that capital that much. We have a solid base of revenue,
Yeah.
and at this rate, we should be able to continue building up the revenue and maintain growth without needing an injection of cash. It might come to that at some stage, but yeah, we'll just have to see how everything goes.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. Um, what would be your advice to, I mean, a lot of kids and a lot of people look at starting businesses in high school, if not at kind of early stage university. You've gone and done it. You're still around kind of 2.5 years later. You've got a reasonably substantial revenue stream there. What would be your advice for someone in your position or slightly older?
I mean, there's no harm in trying. I've met a lot of people who talk to me about these ideas, and they could be insane, like groundbreaking ideas, or they could be terrible ones, but there's no harm in trying. I mean, it took me, I started off selling Cokes out of my locker at recess when I was 12.
Yeah.
And then I started like another couple of businesses in the years after that. And it took me to STAKK to actually build up a solid business. So there's no harm in starting today, really. You just gotta find the easiest way into the market and go for it. You never know what's gonna happen, but you'll know that by the end you'll have learned something. So
that's what I remember kids selling Cokes out of lockers at my school. It was like $1 they were selling Cokes for, but it was still a pretty reasonable margin.
yeah.
And then the teachers cracked down on it. I'm not really sure why, but kind of it was a little bit Maoist, a little bit Marxist.
That was how my Coke selling career ended.
The damn bureaucrats at the school. Incredible. Well, that sounds like you've got kind of the spirit of the entrepreneur, which is something I'm definitely looking to amplify and capture in this series. Is that often you find that people with startups have a string of either successes, values, or a combination of the both behind them, often starting as young as 12, hustling or busking or doing that type of thing. So that's fantastic to hear, because the kids need Coke and not the kind that they can't afford. So that's fantastic to hear that. Connor, I reckon that's basically going to wrap it up. But I mean, we have quite a young audience. What is the best way to sign up to your platform if you are an older person or someone who has a house or someone needs jobs doing, or if you're a student?
Oh, just you just got to head to the website and everything's on there. Most of the website is directed at the people making bookings, but we have a for students page there where you can pretty much enter a waiting list. It's difficult to say how long it takes people to get off that waiting list, because it's they sort of come off when they're needed.
Yeah.
And we're also mainly operating in one region north of Sydney right now. So that's where all of our bookings are.
Yeah.
But in the future, as we grow out, we're definitely going to need people in other areas, and we'll need to be able to bring them in. So if anyone wants to head to STAKK, STAKK.com.au, they can find all of that information there.
Absolutely. Well, that's awesome. And I'll definitely be making sure that all the people at Carnage House are aware of STAKK, because there are jobs that need doing and there are kids that need jobs. So that's fantastic. I really appreciate you coming on, Connor, fellow Cameron, an industrious young man. He's been featured on Pedestrian TV, Startup Daily. A bunch of articles have been written about him. I would encourage people at home who are listening to look him up. Like, he's actually doing some incredible work for someone so young. So thank you again for coming on, Connor. I really, really appreciate it.
All right, great. Thanks, Alexander.
No worries.